Wonderful.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast episode for ScotWeeek. I'm Kelsey Deanne, I'm the director of ScotWeeek, and we also have Cindi McIntosh, our president. And this week we have Charlie Stuart Gay. Hi, Charlie.
Hey, Cindi. Hey, Kelsey.
Charlie,
good to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to see you. I know it's very warm in Los Angeles today. You're very brave to be in your garden.
Well, we have a choice. We either in our house or in our garden, or we're walking our dogs, or we're going to a grocery store once in a while because of the virus.
Okay.
So Charlie, you are an entrepreneur, you're a humanitarian, you're very big into sustainability and doing things that can help save life and our ecosystem for human life. There's so many different avenues that we could start out with you, and you worked with everyone from CHER to Nelson Mandela. So I guess to start out with, tell us what your life was like growing up in little Charlie.
Little Charlie grew up in mainly in London and Dorset. I wore a little Stuart kilt as a kid. I had a little Stuart rug on my prep school bed at the age of 7 or 8, and it was. I had a halcyon upbringing. I can't say I didn't, but I also had a quite typical upbringing. I had a nanny. You know, I thought that I could fly like Mary Poppins and Adam West in Batman, and Tinkerbell, what have you. So, you know, I grew up by myself with two much older sisters who I adore and are still around. And I was sent off to school at a young, early age, and, you know, came out at 18, was then going to go to university in Aberdeen, which in the end of the 70s, early 80s was the Granite City, sort of the hub of oil. Went there for a very short while and left very quickly because my mum's family were all in horse racing, and I could ride racehorses really well as a kid, and I was thin and small. I grew later on, and so I was more on the racetrack than I was anywhere else, and that sort of probably shaped the early part of my life.
It was wonderful. And so then what happened next? Was it then that you went to Australia and worked with musicians, or what happened?
Well, I think because I didn't have a chosen path through university, I was creating risky businesses at a really young age and becoming street smart. So I had a multiple risky businesses from 21 to about 24, but I had that irrevocability around horse racing, and I became one of the sort of young dons of hospitality. A lot of my mates didn't know how to work, but it sounded as if they owned Epsom or Wimbledon or Henley. So I put them all to work, and our girlfriends were the hospitality girls, and I was the bookie. And the table for 10 became 100, became 1,000, became 100,000. Wow. And so I was in the right place at the right time when Thatcher wanted to develop the Docklands, and I had become friends with the East End, North End guys because of the tickets for these sports events. There was a lot of crossover. And so we built the London Arena, which was in the Docklands. And by doing that, we did a deal with Harvey Goldsmith, the great promoter, and started with like Pavarotti and Pink Floyd and stuff. But it was very risky, even at that high level. And like there was no parking at the Docklands. And like there were no buildings except for our London Arena. And things happened. So one particular thing happened that made me go to Australia. And there I was involved with a great promoter and who'd been there for many years, since Roy Orbison's day. And he did all the big acts. And Paul wanted me to stay with him. And so I stayed in Australia, loved it, and we were promoting Fleetwood Mac and Phil Collins and people. And then I met CHER, and CHER liked me and sponsored me to America in 1991.
Wow.
Wow. Did you become her promoter as well then at that time?
No, I was management.
Management.
So I moved from promoting to managing.
Wow.
And yeah, I think the grace that I had is my youth was not necessarily holding on to the past or fearing the future. That stayed with me through life. And I sort of disdained my class system. That's why I was a rebel. I was much more interested in questions than settling on answers. My own loan-out company, because I have various companies, but my own company that would be my own is called Jacobite, which is very rebellious. But I've learned that a rebel is so much more interested in questions than settling on answers, which is a pretty good time in the planet right now, because obviously the answers of 2,000 years with color and creed and dogma and gender and Hadrian's Wall and Celtic or Rangers or Chelsea and Arsenal, it's got us, or black and white or men and women, it's got us to where we are. So the questions are really important now.
Absolutely. It can be more relevant at this moment in time. You must have some amazing stories of things and people that you've known over the years. And it's so fascinating to read a little bit about you, that you've worked with these very well-known people, the Brad Pitts of the world, CHER, who's just absolutely an icon, and I've always loved CHER since, I could first listen to music. I was listening to CHER's music, watched Moonstruck. But then you've also, on the I don't want to say the flip side of things, but how does Nelson Mandela come into the picture here?
Well, there's all the commonality. We all get caught up with stars, and even actors. And Kelsey, you can all relate to this. I once remember Alec Baldwin saying, "No, I'm not an actor. An actor is a guy who's doing two guest roles in Hollywood and maybe a couple of commercials and is eking out a living." Stars are obviously actors, but the acting industry is not really relative to the few women and the few men that one would know. It's an entire industry. CHER, for instance, was under contract to Sunny in the 70s. This is very well known. And she was a girl. And she broke away from Sunny. And in 1981, the story is that she was playing to less than 10 people in an audience in Vegas. And Coppola was in Vegas. CHER was CHER, obviously, with contacts. Had meal with Coppola, and he got a role called Five and Dime Jimmy Dean on Broadway. Ron Mayer became her agent at CAA. She did 7 movies, as you said, snap out of it. Moonstruck got her an Oscar, but her body of work was immense. And so in 1987, with an Oscar, she could then become what she wanted, which was a rock and roll star and not necessarily a cabaret artist. And she goes and does Turn Back Time on a battleship, and MTV's just starting up. She becomes iconic. Her career goes up, it goes down a little bit. I was involved with a lot of commercial stuff with her to do with infomercials. She got a bad rap for doing that. But then again, a few years later, she does Believe. Mm-hmm. And she creates an audience with kids all following her. And, she's probably in her 5th or 6th decade, in her early 70s now. So point is, didn't hold on to the past, didn't fear the future. We all, as the word entrepreneur that you mentioned about me, show me an entrepreneur that hasn't suffered reversals of experiences, whether it be, finance or wrong decisions, or what's meant to be wrong. So basically, everything's an experience, and we learn from the experience, we go on to the next thing. So taking that into humanitarian work, Mandela was in prison for 27 years over an issue to do with what everyone says is black and white. But he knew, for instance, in Liberia, I went to Liberia after being with Mandela, and I funded the first women's empowerment college for the first female president of an African nation. That happened when Me Too happened in the streets of Monrovia in 2003 and 4 after a genocidal war to do with child soldiers. And what happened was the women marched in the streets and said, enough, we're not going to give you sex, man. And the war stopped that day. And it ushers in the first female president of an African nation.
Wow.
So I know. So Me Too was happening a long time ago, So Mandela created forgiveness councils, and, a lot of what we have held on to for thousands of years. Look at James, King James, he comes from Scotland, and Elizabeth, who was the sickly little girl of a mother who was beheaded as the second wife of Henry VIII, has this child who then reigns longer than anyone else until that time. One has peace, and she says, okay, I'm going to bring James down from Scotland when I die. Obviously, he was the relative. It was either going to be him or in the gunpowder plot with Arabella. And within a few years, he creates the King James Bible, and he harries everyone off his land who doesn't see him as head of the church, or the Pope as head of the church. And those people he harried off his land 13 years later were the exact people that were in the Mayflower. So we've all had this cause and effect for thousands of years. And Braveheart and Hadrian's Wall and the Romans, out of the chaos comes the next thing. The next thing was James, King of England and Scotland, So we don't hold on to anything, really.
No, it's interesting that you make that point, out of the chaos. So in today's current chaos, what do you see happening? And do you see anything? Do you have any insight that you might be willing to share as to what's next? Because this is certainly the chaos right now.
Well, there's an inevitability, in my sense, there's inevitability. So every former generation had to deal with massive judgment. And we, as I said, Colour, Creed, Dogma, Gender, Celtic or Rangers, Arsenal, Chelsea. I still, by the way, have massive judgment. I'm a massive Chelsea supporter. I was christened in Chelsea Old Church. I'll always be a blue, even the hat. But if you look back at the former times, they had to deal with judgment, and it caused conflict and wars for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now that judgment in some ways has dissipated. The old will hold on, the new will come through. So you always have fingers pointing at black and white. But, as you point a finger, as I point a finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back. So if the judgment's gone and now we are faced with where we are, we could have, it's awful, but we could have a Holocaustal wars. We could have women burned at the stakes. We could have, the first lords in the 1400s or the 1500s, everything that we know that happened through history. But if you look at it now, there's sort of deep forgiveness and compassion, and we've never been more connected in color and creed and geography. But what we have ignored is how we look after the planet. And so we've all in our lives, inevitably, we try to save ourselves or save ourselves from being something. But if we understand how to shift and be of service, both in the giving and receiving of care, then the planet heals itself. Unfortunately, there's the duality of the love of power, which has been going on like Nero. By the time Nero left the Roman Empire, the energy of money was guilt, greed, shame, hoarding, and lack. We've all bought into it. Each one of us. I've taken companies public in my early 30s because the world thought I was good at infomercials and direct selling because I'd obviously had a result with CHER. But what did I know? And the next, I was worth something 1 minute and I was worth something the next. You're now seeing that with individuals who, like Branson with Virgin, which has done amazing things throughout his life, regardless of whether he's lived in the Virgin Islands since the 70s or not. He can be labeled, a tax haven guy or whatever, but hasn't stayed in England. But, the guy's done an awful lot and employed a lot of people. And now he's coming under a lot of criticism because of how people perceive he's handled this virus issue on behalf of Virgin. So I see it now as an inevitability. I see the chaos bringing forward authentic expression. I see pain, a lot of it, and I see the opportunity and the choice for truth. And as I said, the old systems are still in play, and it will take time for them to die, and they'll hold on and they'll struggle. But the reality is I feel that human endeavor, human spirit coming together, comes together in chaos, just like it did in Liberia, Mandela, or even in your or my life, when we're in that chaotic point, mystery shows up. And as mystery shows up, magic shows up.
So we need to look forward, in essence. And it's kind of vindication, though, to the planet, I feel like, that, well, I don't know if vindication is the right word, but a little bit of justice that oil has dropped to the point that it's dropped.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection's a little wavy. There you are.
Yeah, look, I wrote an article in September, and I obviously have day jobs, so I'm not just hanging around, communicating on these deep spiritual things. I was given irrevocability in deal making. And obviously, initially, my deals were about music and film, and then they related to, and by the way, film for me was I partnered with Frank Yablans, who used to be president of Paramount. Frank's dad was a taxi driver from Queens, who Roy and Walt liked, and they founded Buena Vista. And by 31, he was president of Paramount and greenlit The Godfather at 32. He said, I'm not going to make Godfather 2 until it's a better script so I can win an Oscar. And Godfather 2 did. And when Brando held him over a barrel saying, you're going to give me this for Godfather 2. I want this, this, and this, and these points. Frankie said, you're dead. And Brando said, I'm not dead because it's a prequel. Godfather 2 is a prequel to Godfather 1. And Frankie said, you're dead in my movie, and put the phone down. So that's why Brando isn't really in Godfather 2.
Wow.
But yeah, but now our world is related more to food production and water rights. And we still are quite good at hospitality and creating curative conscious containers that make people feel good. So we own a hotel, fledgling, but very successful hotel in Tula, Mexico. And then we have these products and restaurants and stuff. But the point, I don't know what I'm showing now. What was the question?
But I was talking
about the oil prices. About the oil prices.
Well, it's interesting because it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a little glimmer of justice to the earth that oil dropped below zero.
Yeah, but here's the point. I wrote an article in September, and it said, in hardly 5 years' time, water will have become a distant memory for over 1 billion people on the planet. There'll be social and economic unrest, and wars will be over blue gold. So as you have kids, and you reach 10, or we reach 10, 11 billion people on the planet, we have to question, how do we feed 10 or 11 billion people. Castro came up with the word blue gold. And I was in Havana once, and I was in a tiny bookshop, and I was reading his memoir, his communications, and Castro's was very visible, Fidel Castro, because he used to speak to his people every week. So it was all written down. And I can't see anything shifting away from that, because water rights, not the fact we can't make enough water, we can all make water, but water rights are becoming sort of the blue gold of this generation. And people are getting criminalized in Africa. There are tunnels getting built up in the headwaters of Tibet that are 1,000 kilometers long, being moved into arid areas of China. And the Chinese have practiced amazing patience since they scuttled their fleet in 1402. To put into context with history, the English or the British had, I think, 27 ships when the Spanish Armada occurred in the Elizabethan times, and the French and the Spanish had 33. In 1402, the Chinese sank 1,500 ships. They were routinely globalizing the world. So, yes, oil prices are down, and even if oil prices go up, that's actually not the gold of the future. That's going to change our planet. The beauty about oil prices going down and us consuming less oil is that our skies are blue, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kelsey had a lot of wonderful things to say about you, and I started reading about you, and I thought, here's an amazingly, you have accomplished so much. There's so many intriguing things that I can just read about your life, and the things that you've done. You've really made your mark, on the world, as it were, and you're an author as well. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about your books and here?
Yeah, I mean, we all make our mark, and so I always often hear, "Oh, you've made it," or "You've done it." Well, you've done what? You've made what? You've got reached. Yesterday is purely a shaping for this second. It's all it is. And so I feel very fortunate that I've had a lot of experiences, and that I was kept safe. Because certainly in my 20s, I could have easily lost a particular part. And, you may not be speaking to me today, but I was kept safe. And so I woke. Dante once wrote the Dante's Inferno. And that was a juxtaposition between love and light and fear and darkness. And the first words were, "In the middle of the road of my life, I awoke upon a dark wood where the true way was wholly lost."
Yes.
So my experiences allow me to understand my own self-judgments. And, Rumi said, "Beyond the reasoning of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." So again, the more I stretch, the more I look at, the issues of how do we produce food for 11 billion people or whatever, the more I can struggle with my own self-beliefs and then come through it with compassion and forgiveness. So, the book anyone should write, and I'm sure you guys write a lot. I know you do. And writing is cathartic. So for me, it allows me to voice things that are from within. And I find it a really lovely process. So yeah, I wrote a book called Here, which I would never recommend as a title, because every day I would have to re-edit it, because every day I'd hear something more that I hadn't heard the day before. So the book needed editing. So at some point I put it like, all right, I've heard enough. And then I've just been writing a book called Conversation, but that's more about poetry and prose coming out of me. And I think writing is also destiny and legacy. It's definitely legacy. Did Shakespeare write Shakespeare? Shakespeare's works are great, and we all love them. So, I love writing. And there is a novel in there because of this head. But whether I'm able to accomplish that in this lifetime, I don't know.
Well, maybe now there's some time to do some of these things. I don't know.
There is no time. There is no time. Do you understand? Because we make chips and tortillas that are gluten-free, grain-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free, corn-free, soy-free, additive-free. So we've just last week brought in an amazing woman whose last job was running General Mills. She ran a $2.5 billion business unit. And Daniela, my wife, Hunter, by the way, Daniela's background is Scottish. Her father was a great golfer.
Wow.
So Daniela and I were fortunate that her childhood was very sickly in England. And so she learned to use grain-free and gluten-free, which is grain-free is inherently gluten-free, as her diet. And I met her 10 or 11 years ago, and she got me off snoring by getting me off dairy.
Really?
Which basically made our nighttime good. And so now we're in over 5,000 stores in America and Canada with the chips and the tortillas, and we're just opening a space. I've just come back from here. We're building a conscious kitchen to communicate a theater really about food beyond just serving you something that looks nice on a plate. And we're plastic free and have been for 5 years in Tulum. And we only cook with avocado oil. We do our chips online in a manufacturing plant with coconut oil, and we're organic. And so we're really practicing what we're preaching as much as we can around stimulating small farmers around the world who we believe should be owning their own land. And to get to the 11 million people to feed to 11 billion, we have to move to a plant-focused diet. That doesn't mean to say we don't have protein that's well sustainably or caught properly, but that's the basis of how we eat.
And I just want to put in, so Real Coconut is the name of your products.
That's right.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that people know.
Although they're now beginning, because it's got bigger. So now because our hero products are coconut, plantain, yucca, and hemp. And then in the sea, every breath that you and I are taking comes, majority of it, 50 to 80% of the breathing, every breath comes from the algae in the sea, not from the trees. Trees are vital. Obviously, the Amazon is vital. But if we don't look after our ocean, then we're really done. And there's nothing, from all of the experiences of life, there's nothing more expensive than ignorance. Nothing. Nothing.
Very,
Very well said.
I just want to learn more about, or I want people to learn more about your hotel in Tulum, Sanara, because you have this amazing yoga instructor, Johanna. I took one of her classes and I was very sore the next day, but she's been doing them on Zoom lately because of isolation. So you have your restaurant down there, you have this beautiful ocean beachfront, you have wonderful yoga and sound bath studios. So how did that get started and what's that journey like?
Again, it's a manifestation, because it sounds as if we would have been wealthy when we started that process, but life has had its ups and downs. AOL, given the value to buy Time Warner, took me out of the public market, 2001. 2008, everyone was given no money down mortgages. So the whole world, and by the way, that's charities suffer the most then. Like today, we're all caught up with the virus, and the whole world is caught up with the virus. But if I'm speaking to Liberia, which I did last weekend and will be this weekend, and they went through Ebola, the world sort of supported Ebola because the world didn't have its own issue. We get distracted when we obviously have our own issues to deal with. So we really do have to create sustainable models. Sanara means, or Sanará means it will heal in Spanish. It will heal. So going back to that giving and receiving of care, we buffer each other's mirrors. You buffer your relationship with your husband or your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. You see yourself more clearly. That's the giving and receiving model. So Daniela, being sick as a child, she did something that no one should do, and she would not advise to it. But she went as a young woman to Sinai and became a dive instructor. There were circumstances that led to her having done a degree in Bristol. She went there, rang her dad, and said, Mum, and said, I'm not coming home, and became a dive instructor. And she had a single child, as a single mum. She went to Mexico. So when we met 11 years ago, and she was in Liberia holding cameras with CNN and on what we were doing with the president there and profiling the president, we fell in love. Question was, where should we live? And we went to Tulum in 2012 and fell in love with it and thought we could just live here because we have a blended family. I have 3 children, not that they were with us going into Tulum, and she has 2. So we started at school the first month, and then a few months later we went down to the beach and realized, well, we were at the beach quite a bit, but we realized that Tulum was no different from anything else in our world, which is this washing machine between love and fear, and federal, state, and municipal. And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time and started building and got a piece of land from a really, really great guy who had 5 other properties down there, and started building and asked friends and family to get involved. And we opened within 13 months the first stage in 2015 of Sanara, Tulum. And 2 years later, we were voted number 3 in the world on Harper's Bazaar's top 150 greatest hotels in the world. Wow. So magic showed up. Magic literally showed up. There's 19 suites. And what we did was everything that no one else did. We put this yoga studio that Kelsey just talked about and the restaurant at the front. And then we put the rooms around in the wellness center. So we didn't make sort of, oh, I have to have that room because it's the beach room. And we created this curative conscious container. And everyone asked, how did you do it? And Shakespeare did say, apparently, to be or not to be, that is the question. And whatever you or we do, or whatever anyone who's listening does, just be as authentic as you can be in your being, not your doing, but in the being. Allow your creativity to come through and have zero compromise. If you've got an idea, just follow it down and don't have limiting beliefs. And we built something and it's been magical. And now we're being asked to do other projects like it.
That's amazing. I'm so excited.
And it's very inspiring to listen to you as well. I'm very inspired by your outlook on everything. You're very well read as far as philosophies go. And, it's just amazing. And I hope we can put in the links down below here, how to find your books, a link to the Real Coconut, and also to your wonderful hotel at Sanara, so people can find you.
That'd be lovely. I mean, I came because you asked me to be on the call and just to share. So, I love what you guys are doing, Again, the connectivity of geography is intense, and LA has always been a city of angels, and it's always had both stuff going on in light and darkness, and we all navigate through it. And the British here, the Scots here, we've all, everyone breaks their own mold when they're born, and we all have the karmic placenta of time and the generations from before. But it's great what you guys are doing, connecting us all.
Okay, well, I was so thrilled and so honored to have you on board. And I know that fingers crossed, we still have ScotCon in September, but if not, it'll be April 2021. But we're so excited to have you be a speaker at ScotCon and to be a mentor and to share more of your wisdom about your journey and encouraging others to do the same. And just last plug, I know earlier today you were in Malibu, and I got to tour your space. I was very lucky when you were building it. But can you just tell us a little bit more about the restaurant Real Coconut in Malibu that you're opening, and what the stage is, where it's at right now?
Yes, thank you. It's called Real Coconut Conscious Kitchens for You and the World. So it's taking what we learned in Tulum and bringing it to the States. We were asked to do it in many other places, but to stay in balance, it's 20 minutes from our house. And for Daniela to feel really good, it's a great space. And we'll be able to cater pretty well all of Los Angeles because we've created sort of a cloud kitchen there. And we've been asked to do this in Denver and San Francisco and New York. We've been asked recently in London to do it. And, you know, people would say, you're pretty mad going into the restaurant space, because everyone in the restaurant industry actually wants to be in the product business. Everyone wants to have a product on the shelf of a supermarket. But for us, you know, we can reach millions of people with a $5 bag and of chips or a burrito or what have you. And at the end of the day, you know, a product is as good as its taste, its functionality, its price point, its branding, its packaging. But in the space, magic shows up because it's like this canvas. And every day, it's why I love hospitality and anyone in it. You don't know who's going to show up. You and I had to Google, and we had to figure out the Zoom time, and we made the time to do this. You know, magic shows up in spaces. And Malibu and LA obviously is a very interesting place with a lot of people asking a lot of questions. So we're able to experientially, Mandela said something when he came out of prison, which was attributed to him, but written by a woman called Marianne Williamson, who recently was running in the Democratic race for a little bit. And apart from the opening, it's the poem by saying it's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. It finishes by saying, as I liberate myself from my own fears, my presence automatically gives other people permission to do the same. So by us continuing, obviously, life for me has been mainly one of promotion. I've been good at supporting others to be the best they can be, putting people onto seats in arenas and stadiums, figuring out, you know, direct response infomercials and stuff like that. Going to Liberia, going to Mozambique and figuring out after Diana died how to reduce landmine removal from a horrendous price per mine to a much lower price. And that's why Mandela and his wife from Mozambique and others were patrons, like Richard and Brad Pitt, and like John Paul, who owned Paul Mitchell and Patron. JP, you don't know Paul Mitchell and Patron, but JP was living in the back of his car collecting cans, having failed apparently as a hair care guy, living in Ventura, and he couldn't afford colored silk screens. So that's why Paul Mitchell's black and white, you know? So, you know, like attracted like with us rebellious people saying we could reduce landmine removal. So now the focus is around food and stimulating these crops that were throwaway crops. Coconut flour became what it is for us because you fell in love with coconut oil that produced the pulp. We don't sell coconut water because it only comes from a green coconut that only produces coconut water. We'll sell it in our hotel when it drops from our tree outside. But you want a sweet tasting coconut from Asia, and it only comes from one particular place, one particular country. So we're able to take the pulp of a mature coconut once the oil is squeezed and create a price point that we can put into Costco. So this isn't as well creating products for the small elite, it's for the masses. And clearly, you know, that's our plan, and that's what we're doing in Malibu. And hopefully, we have a foundation that we've recently started for ourselves called Influence Foundation. And we all have different words around, or connotations around words like crusaders or compromise or influence. We can all look at each word differently based on our experience of it. But for us, we just constantly looking at nudging consciousness, and giving people that choice of that question. What happens if I do eat this way? What happens if, my gut is this way rather than an autoimmune disease? Right now with the virus, and I'm not going to be a Donald Trump giving theories as to what will or won't cure a virus, but the reality is, there's epidemics in Germany and Italy and France and England around autoimmune. And any disease, the disease is itself, but what attacks the system is the immune system. And we're definitely seeing a lot of people that are suffering acutely at the moment because of their autoimmune system operating. And I'm not a scientist like Donald Trump will say when I give a disclaimer to that, but we have a time period around these chronic illnesses that are coming in through this generation and the last. Our forefathers didn't forage. We fed our children, if we were in Scotland or in England in the old days, differently to the way we feed today. And our systems are suffering because of it. So that's why we're committed tremendously to food. We see it as the solution for our planet.
That's brilliant. I love it. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, Charlie?
I'm pretty good. I could read you a poem.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to read you one poem.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay. Meanwhile, we can talk a little bit more about. I can't wait to read Charlie's book. I've ordered 2 of them from Amazon, and I cannot wait to read them. Just find you so fascinating and inspiring, like I said, which is wonderful. I think in this day and age and right now, people need inspiration.
100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, water.
Thank you. And they do. The inspiration comes from within too. And so, yes, we can take it from other people. And if any words that I shared today can be inspiring, that's great. But everything that's seen outwardly, my real word is to bring it inward and use this time, which is a really weird time for all of us. Obviously, we're probably more prepared. That we saw some things sort of coming. We didn't know, obviously, this virus was going to hit, but it's more. This is a time to look inward, and make choices and be courageous, and be with the loved ones, and say, the way we were before will always be put into a normal way, or will be put into a way, but perhaps that isn't the way. Perhaps we do look at it in sort of rebellious ways. Peter Finch, who was the first guy before Heath Ledger to win a posthumous Oscar for his role as a broadcaster and a newscaster in network. Mm-hmm. He's famous for putting his head out of the window and say, I'm not going to stand for this anymore. Stop the insanity.
Mm-hmm.
And we're, as I said, we're awake to so many things now as a collective, not as individuals, but as a collective. So, yeah, I'll leave you with this poem. It's called Mystery, which I've alluded to. I wrote it just last month. Mystery is as mystery does. Spirit holy, Holy Spirit. Mystery does as mystery is, revealing whose will may be done. What mystery signs is central within us, purposing out at times where we peripheral strayed. Mystery has never slept, as its wisdom whispers, breathing life despite our forebearers' turbulent wake. Mystery has no limit, unlike minds, where color or creed or age or ages have laid their minds. Mystery has no barriers in the wake of minds that separated geography and gender, dogma and exchange. Where is mystery that has no judgment of judging judgment as I am? Where is this mystery then that has no grasping past or future fears viced only by my life's comprehension? Mystery reveals itself in faithful moments, how being is to be rather than expecting, doing not to be. To be is a mystery, and yet it is not. Mystery is in a question. Befriending mystery is the question. And where in the vulnerability of this question, I am more able to say yes to a mysterious appearance. Again, divine whispers, I am mystery. I am mystery within you. Imagine this. Imagine me. Mystery, uttering Spirit's voice, not revealed to you until now. Until now. Holy Spirit, being light, let it be. Let I be. Wondrously are you now gifting mystery to another, your friend, your foe, a stranger, tuning your own being and sense creation divine. Ask within, no abandon what shall be given. Why hide ever again, my reawakening child, my awakening friend? And once mysteriously awoken, can you ever sleep? And if you do, is your wake mysteriously in peace? I am that you can be, as mysterious to another as mystery is to you. I am grateful that you can be, and you are that I can be. Resoundingly voicing whispered truth. As mystery is, as mystery does. How mystery does is how mystery is. And it is. And so I am. Mystery, thy will be done.
That's a beautiful message to leave with everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie.
Bless you, ladies. Bless you. Bless everyone out there.
Bless you. And
Be
bless you.
safe. Be sound.
And thank you so much. It was a great joy today.
Bless you. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.